Greetings, DSW doctoral students. On behalf of Dr. Jay Miller, Associate Dean Dr. Keely Benner, the Director of Doctoral Studies, Dr. Natalie Pope, I want to give a warm welcome and thank you to Lieutenant Governor of Kentucky, Jacqueline Coleman, for speaking with us today. Thanks for joining us. I had the pleasure of meeting Jacqueline a couple of years ago at a similar residency week in the College of Education before she was Lieutenant Governor. At the time, she was still a high school principal and basketball coach. And I can assure you that she is not in this for the politics, but because of her passion and care for the children and the people of Kentucky. So thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. I heard there's a pandemic going on and there's a few things to do. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule and joining us here today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And you are right. I definitely did not get into this for the politics, but it is part of the collateral damage, I think. So, but I want to thank you so much for inviting me today. I just have such an enormous amount of respect for the work that you all do and for the work that you are signing up to do for our communities and for all of the help that you're going to provide to our families. And as a teacher, I recognize that because I live it in a very different way, more of in the school setting than in the home setting, which is where most of you are going to operate. So, you know, I think we all agree here as teachers and social workers that our government has a responsibility to protect its citizens, especially our most vulnerable ones. And compassionate and timely social reform represents that commitment. And you guys know that better than anybody. You know, as social workers, you have taken it upon yourselves to be caregivers, to be protectors of children and of our families. And whether it's children or the elderly or people who are experiencing mental health issues, who live in poverty, you are dedicating yourself and your life to those vulnerable populations. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for that commitment and that dedication, and say to you very clearly that you do not get the credit that you deserve and you do not get the thanks that you deserve. And so I want to make sure that you hear it from me today, that I thank you and that Governor Beshear and I appreciate you and the work that you do for Kentuckians every single day. You know, I share your passion in terms of social policy. It's one of the reasons I became a teacher. Because it's where policy and social effects can be seen very, very clearly. Because of my experience as a teacher and now as Lieutenant Governor, I have an even greater respect and appreciation for the role of government in policy and in social reform. You know, particularly during this time, we mentioned the pandemic just a minute ago, you know, the need for our government and policy to push for social reform is more clear than ever. You know, COVID-19 has exposed problems that have existed in plain sight. I like to say that COVID-19's created its own set of issues, but it has certainly compounded old ones that have been right in front of us this whole time. So one of those issues is the essential services that our school systems offer, and those are so often taken for granted. So now we realize that schools nurture the intellectual, physical, and mental well-being of our kids in a holistic way. If you're in education or maybe even in your field, we call it the whole child, and serving the whole child has always been one of our top priorities. So the panic that has ensued over the lack of childcare in Kentucky is a desperate plea for universal pre-K for our families, especially the families who are in need the most. You know, the struggle to reach our kids and our families even in far eastern and far western Kentucky is a sign that we have to expand rural internet and broadband. And I'm an example of that. I live in rural Kentucky, and so I feel those pains when we talk about reaching kids digitally and families digitally. So that lack of access to affordable early childhood programs and rural broadband. Those things have proven to be very, very pervasive workforce and social issues, especially for women, especially for rural Kentuckians, and especially for our struggling families. So, government and policy has a responsibility to address this. Our job is to meet our fellow Kentuckians where they are and do our best to serve their needs to help lift up every family across the Commonwealth. So we look at issues of childcare, of racial injustice, the need for criminal justice reform, LGBTQ rights, and gender equality. All of those issues exist, not just in Kentucky, but everywhere. And we see that there is a great value in correcting injustices just simply in human terms. That is what social reform aims to address, and that is what you commit to confront. And for that, I commend you. So in every situation, it is clear that government must be responsive, policy must be compassionate, and I know, and I want you to know, that I'm advocating for that for every family in Kentucky every single day. So I want to thank you for inviting me today. I've enjoyed speaking with you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have that I can't answer. I'm very honest when I can't answer them. But more than anything, I want to thank you for what you're doing and for the work that you've committed to do for every family across this Commonwealth.
Thank you so much. This is so sorry, technical difficulties. Do you want to say something? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I apologize. I had a hard time getting unmuted there. So thanks for the assistance with that. So Lieutenant Governor Coleman, my name is Kaylee Benner, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. I know that, as Jason indicated, you've kind of stepped into a role that you were fully prepared for, but it still has to feel a little bit unsteady at times. It does for all of the rest of us, at least. And I'm wondering if you could maybe speak to our DSW students are really those social work leaders and across the nation too, but it's for sure across the Commonwealth too. Can you maybe speak to how you would, what recommendations you might make to kind of navigate whenever things get unsteady? What's your kind of guiding compass in terms of your leadership style and what you think folks need to hear from you in that role?
Well, yes, and thank you for that. And you're right. The governor and I were sworn in on December 10th. And within a matter of weeks, this pandemic hit, and we had to take on this challenge. And while we ran for office to serve Kentuckians, we kind of imagined that might be in a different way. But we are still very focused on the things that we care about, like education, raising wages for Kentuckians, healthcare, all of those things, just in a very different way now. And so what I would say about being able to cope, I think, and continue to move forward, the thing that I have found that's most important to me and is most grounding to me is to stay in touch with the people who are what I like to call the boots on the ground. It's very easy to get in a bubble especially if you are in a leadership position, surrounded by folks that you have selected or appointed. And sometimes that can become an echo chamber. And so I like to reach out to folks in the field where I may be considering a policy or, we may be considering an executive order, and talk with them about what that impact would be, how that can help them, what unintended consequences might be. Because while we're still operating, honestly, I feel like in times we're operating with our hair on fire, because especially when it first hit, it was just overwhelming. But at the same time, you have to stay grounded and connected to the reason why you chose to serve. And that is, for me, our people. And so that is one of the most helpful things that I've been able to do, is stay in touch with all of those folks and remember why we stepped up to serve. Oh, Kayla, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't seem to unmute myself for some reason. So thank you for that. And I really appreciate the comments too about the echo chamber, making sure we're hearing from all voices, right? I think that that's truly an important aspect of social work too, is to make sure that all voices are being heard. And that takes, it's an active right voice. It's not something that we can just assume or take for granted. I know you have just a minute left, 2 minutes left, I think. Do you think that you would be comfortable in kind of sharing what you think the role, I know your whole background has been on the emphasis of education and the journey that it can take you or any of us. Do you think that you'd feel comfortable sharing just a few thoughts on the role of education for those most disadvantaged and vulnerable populations?
Yes. And so, one of the huge concerns that I have right now, we're in this back and forth kind of push and pull about how to move forward in public education right now. Because on the one hand, as an educator, I can empathize with the folks who would be in the classroom and the challenges that will arise in terms of their health and safety. And I, completely understand where they're coming from with their concerns with face-to-face instruction. But on the other hand, I'm also very concerned about the kids that we have to keep eyes on and who are aided every time they walk through the front door of the school building. Those are the kids that, we are all there to serve. They're the kids that need us the most. And they're the ones that I worry about the most. It is no secret that, we have racial disparities, we have socioeconomic disparities in our education system, and they existed before COVID. What I hope does not happen when we get to the other side of this is that we realize that we've exacerbated those problems. And so we have to work really, really hard to stay connected. That interconnection, I think, is something we all took for granted before. And now we realize exactly how connected we were to each other. And it's something as simple as not being able to shake a hand or give someone a hug when they walk in the room feels odd, right? And so to have that face-to-face contact with those kids, to be able to lay eyes on them, to be able to ask them how they're doing and hear from them beyond whatever they're learning in the classroom is so important and so valuable. And so, that's got to be a major focus for all of our educators as we move through this COVID-19 pandemic, is to not lose sight of the kids that need us the most.
Absolutely. And I think that you're right. I don't think until we're through it, we'll really know the impact that's occurred. And going to have some work to do, definitely.
Yes.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time here at the University of Kentucky. We appreciate you reaching out to us and our students and kind of sharing your thoughts and hearing from you about education as well as leadership. And I think that's definitely important, but certainly integral to what our DSW students are doing. So thank you so much for your time today. And I hope you'll come back at some point.
Yes. Thank you for having me. And again, thank you all for everything that you're doing for our communities and our families.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.